Hello, everybody. This is Kelly and Jim from the XFiles Preservation Collection, and we're here talking with Mr. Paul Terry, author of the XFiles, the Official Archive. Hi, Paul. How are you today?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. It's great that you're here.
We're excited. Yeah, definitely. So for our fans, let's start off with you telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
For sure. Yeah. So my name's Paul. I'm a writer and a composer. So I had that strange, creative space as a career where if I'm not writing books, I'm writing music. So I jump between those two fields quite regularly, sometimes at the same time, which can be a little chaotic, but that's the nature of projects and the nature of working in the creative industries, is that oftentimes timetables don't wait for one to finish and one to start. But yeah, they're the two disciplines that I tend to do.
That's interesting that you mix writing and music.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting. And it's both writing, but one, two different.
Yeah, there's more crossover than you'd think, actually, in terms of, especially if I'm scoring something for a film or whatever would need some instrumental music. If you're watching to picture, or if it's a podcast, you're listening to the stories, you're figuring out how to tell a story with music. You're figuring out how to support that story. So when you're writing a book, there's a similar approach to the structure. It's figuring out how to retain the attention of the audience and guide them through what you're writing.
Great.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. What inspired you to become like a writer?
Oh man, that's the that's the $64,000 question. Who knows? I mean, I was creating comic books when I was a child at school, just because something about the storytelling interested me. I was watching a lot of those shows back in the 80s, like Transformers and things like that, and that would spin off my brain into weird places of, doodling my own comic strips. I think my mum still has them in the attic somewhere, but it all starts there, I think, with a lot of people who enjoy telling stories in some form, if it's music or writing or drawing or artwork. So I think it just started there, and it's something that I think when you're really passionate about something and passionate about telling stories, it's not really a conscious decision, if that makes sense. You just wake up and you kind of want to do it. So if I'm wandering around my house and an idea comes about a song or something, then it's just a case of you just pick up the guitar and do it. You don't plan it. You don't say, well, I'll book in 30 minutes at 4 p.m. to explore that idea. It's I think ideas are pretty chaotic, but I enjoy that. I enjoy the randomness. My friends often describe my life as very random and chaotic, and it's not for everybody. Being self-employed, being a freelancer, it's not for everybody, but I love it.
So everything's just kind of like spontaneous.
Yeah, it's not really, some people talk about, well, where did the idea for that song come from, or that lyric come from, or the concept of a book. I don't think you can ever really say definitively, oh, it was because of this one thing. I think sometimes it sounds very, ephemeral and strange, but you can be walking down the road and get an idea from something that you hear or see. And then I think it's the ideas that stick. I think they're the ones that you tend to explore the most. And this book is a perfect example of an idea that wouldn't go away from my head.
So it just kind of came natural to you. Did you consciously know I'm going to be a writer, or did you think you were going to be some, how they say, what are you going to be when you grow up? Was your answer always, I'm going to be a writer?
No, not at all, actually. No, I think it's if there's something within you to want to tell stories and write copy, or do creative writing, whatever the form of writing is, actually, because I've done a lot of editing in the magazine space as well. That's very interesting. It's I guess if I go back to the school days of the the interview with the teacher who says, well, tell me the things that you like, and then I'll tell you what you're going to be. We've all had that experience at high school.
Yep.
And I can't remember what mine was. Something like, oh, you'll probably be a teacher, like a sort of standard. And you go, okay, don't feel like that's going to happen. So I think if you're really, as I said earlier, if you're really passionate about something like this, there's not much of a conscious decision. It's something that you're always developing. I think that's the right way to describe it. For example, for a period of time, I was in a full-time position working as an editor in the magazine field. And, in lunch breaks or after leaving that office and going home, I would be working on songs or working on something for film music. It wasn't something that I thought was a problem in a sense of, oh, I've got too much going on. It's just something that you did, a bit like putting on your favorite TV show like the X-Files, or making dinner you enjoy. I think if it's an effortless, unconscious decision, then it's never going to go away. It's going to keep, like a woodpecker, poking at your brain going, keep writing, keep writing.
So then how do you get into that? How do you break through? How do you make that your career?
Right.
It's a great question. I don't think there's ever a simple answer to it. I think it's that classic phrase of preparation meets opportunity. I really think that's a really key phrase. I really got into working in magazines and writing reviews and things like that, interviewing music artists at college. And I would say to anybody listening to this who is pre-college age or high school or whatever, if they're involved with a student magazine in some form, a student newspaper, a student radio station, where you can, if you're really passionate about writing, just to start there, because they're the foundations for it. Getting edited is really important, and it's just those building blocks. And then I think before you realize that you've amassed a bunch of articles and thousands of hours, and then if you have an opportunity, if an opportunity presents itself, my first professional job running a magazine was the official Lego magazine for the UK called Lego Adventures. But I know for a fact I wouldn't have got the opportunity if I hadn't prepared with the 3 years working on the student magazine, because ironically, my job interview for that job was, okay, yes, you've been to college, but have you ever worked on a magazine? They were far more interested in the free time that I gave my student mag than actually studying a degree in English. So there you go. Life isn't binary. You don't know what's going to get thrown at you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how long have you been a fan of the X-Files?
You'll be happy to hear from the very start. It was, when the BBC were doing sort of, I guess, trailers or things in newspapers teasing the show was coming. I've always been a big horror fan. I know, sir, you're a big horror fan as well. You both are. And so for me, I think that my brain and my being was ready for a show like the X-Files to come along, because I was a teenager, and prior to that I'd really been curious about the horror genre, but also science fiction and things from the throwback era as well, from the 40s and the 50s, seeing the reruns of things. Quatermass was a big deal for me. Kolchak, of course, seeing there was a great BBC Two series called Mystery Train, and that was an amazing series. It didn't run for very long, but it was like a collection of things. So they would say, here's a David Lynch short film, here is an episode of Kolchak, and here's a movie called Q the Winged Serpent. And it was just this kind of like, the stuff thrown at you every week. And so for me, that was just the perfect, I would record it on a VHS and watch it the next day after doing my paper route. And so, and having a paper route and doing things like car cleaning locally, you get a little bit more pocket money, and then you can start buying VHS tapes. Showing my age, you can start collecting movies, and then as you say, it's now early to mid 90s, and this show called the X-Files comes along, and I was already fascinated with the UFO phenomena and monsters and cryptids and things, and so it did feel like I used to watch it with my mum every week, and it felt like, you've made this show for me. You've made this show for all the things I love. Exactly. So proud lifelong fan.
Awesome.
It's good to hear. Okay, so with the X-File, the archive book, what inspired you to come up with the idea and say, I want to do that. I want to write that book?
It was really the show first and foremost, of course, because the more I thought about, especially once I'd been in the book space a little bit. My first book was The Lost Encyclopedia that I co-wrote with Tara Bennett, and that was a gargantuan task because it was the A to Z of the show Lost and the island, and it presented itself almost like a historical encyclopedia, as though everything that happened actually happened. So it was, you can only imagine the research that was required for that kind of book. So my first book out the gate as a co-written book was this gargantuan experience of research and almost like a puzzle, figuring out how things can snap together. And so I think that I really enjoy the ambitious quality of that project. And as the years went along, I'd always had this idea about the X-Files as in the definitive term of that, the actual X-Files in my head, but wasn't sure, how do you do that? How do you make that a situation where you can pitch a concept? And it really was this kismet timing of the show coming back. So when the show was announced publicly that season 10 was going to happen, I'd already had a really great working experience with some friends at Fox. We did a bunch of properties with Fox. And so I just went for it. I just thought, well, there's no better opportunity. The show's coming back. Yeah. This concept, this in-world, real experience for the fans of the official archive, the official files of the show. This is my window to pitch the concept. And so I did. And a friend there who's now somewhere else, but he loved the idea. And that was like stage one, if you like, getting him representing Fox to like the idea. And the thing is about ideas like this in this official licensed publishing space, you need to have a lot of stamina. It's always a marathon, it's never a sprint. And so to shorten the story, it wasn't until the end of 2017 that the right publisher, should we say, a few others, showed a little bit of interest, but but the right publisher in Abrams came into my world. And the editor, Eric Cloffer, of that was a gigantic X-Files fan. And I'd worked with him for a little bit up to this point, but had no idea he was a huge fan. And so
you had a leg up kind of now.
You just think, oh man, I found the publisher with an editor who is this as big a fan as me. And I knew then it was the right home. And then of course, there's some development. Of course, what has to happen is the concept was obviously sent to Chris Carter, who gave it his blessing as a concept. And then then the balls could really start rolling. But it was a big project, a really big project. And it was one of those very strange out of body experience moments as a fan. I'm sure you guys have had this with what you're doing with the amazing work you're doing.
Yeah.
Working on the preservation stuff. You think, I'm actually going to get the opportunity to create an in-world book, which is ostensibly the actual files from the X-Files. So it's I say that out loud now talking to you guys. It's still a little bit surreal, to say the least.
Well, the book is absolutely wonderful. I looked at it from, cover to cover, and I was really impressed.
Thank you.
You did a phenomenal job. How long did it take you to write the book?
Oh, crikey. Let me think. I'll go back in time a little bit now. Well, the process really starts with the rewatch, right? Because, we're all fans. We've watched the show a bunch of times. But when you make a book like this, you have to, and I'll say me, had to rewatch the show in a completely different way. So I'm not rewatching the show, making notes as a fan. I'm watching the show with a very specific rule, which is what happened in the case. What were Mulder and Scully privy to? What did they see? What didn't they see? That was a really crucial thing. If they weren't aware of things that they couldn't do a report on, it wouldn't make sense to exist in an in-world report to Skinner and to go on file. So it became this, like an investigation. The pause button is being hit constantly. I'm doing frame by frame advancements. And it became this domino effect where once I got inside that headspace of that was a really crucial rule, then it became, wait a second, thank you, Blu-ray restoration team, because now I'm seeing things that none of us have ever seen before. I'm seeing, name tags of minor characters that maybe have just a surname, or I'm seeing a detail on a file that's held up on the screen for 4 frames, and I'm catching that. And so the investigation then got deeper. And so I'm writing down all these things. And one of the crucial things which came out of that was this massive list of essentially kind of blanks that could be filled. And these were things like surnames of minor characters, supporting characters, so actually some, middle tier characters too, first names of characters, or some dates that were maybe unknown at the time to fans. And during the creative process of doing the book, there was a point where through the publishing team, I posed this question. I said, if you want to reach out to Chris Carter's office and just ask the question. You know, the show is about mystery, the show is about unanswered questions too, but if he would like to have some of these names revealed for the first time, this would be a great opportunity for the fans to have these really cool Easter eggs that they'll just discover and go, I had no idea that person's name was this or whatever. And he came back and said yes, and started to provide some really cool Easter eggs. And the amazing thing that happened from that was the message came through as, well, maybe Frank Spotness and Vince Gilligan, maybe they want to play too, because there were a lot of their episodes featured in this book.
Right.
So then at a later date, there was another couple of emails that came through that had all these other names revealed, small details from those episodes, which were folded into the book too. And so I really wanted this to be an experience for the reader. I didn't want them to just read the files. I wanted them to have this feeling that wherever they look, however minor it is, maybe there's something new, maybe there's something hidden, maybe there's something they need to think about a little bit more and maybe try and maybe decode. Maybe there are some secrets in there. Why are certain things redacted? Pay very close attention to these details. So as you can tell, this wasn't just a standard, hey, let's write a book. This became an all-consuming, obsessive experience, because if you're going to do this, if you're going to get the green light to do the official archives of the actual X-Files, I don't think you should miss a beat. You should try and cover everything.
Wow, that sounds.
It's amazing, all the detail.
Yes, and I give a big shout out to Blu-ray discs. Yeah, because we feel your pain sometimes on that one. You know, I'm going frame to frame, and I got to go back, and I know exactly how you feel on that one.
Yeah, gotta make sure everything's what we think
Right.
it is. Yep. So we know now that you did have support from a lot of people involved with the show. That was going to be one of my questions, but that one we've answered it.
Not to jump in, but I must give a shout out to the incredible designers of this book, Headcase Design, specifically Alex Bruce and Paul Keppel, because my goodness. So one of the things that I was obsessed about was this book had to take you through time, okay? Because you have files which are from the early 90s, you have some moments which are even further decades back than that, like the J. Edgar Hoover letter. And there are all these details that I'm a font obsessive. I'm a real nerd about typography and stuff like that. And so one of the things we wanted to do was to create, again, an experience where even if you're not aware of, you know, the fonts that were used in those eras, it doesn't matter, but it should feel like the passage of time has passed as you go through these files, through the seasons essentially of the show.
Right.
And I'm so delighted with how obsessive they were too. They did so much research about, well, these kind of fonts were being used by, you know, government agencies at this time, and this was the kind of leading that was being used. The paper stock that would come out of a dot matrix printer was this kind of thing. And again, I can see your faces reacting, and mine was the same. It was delight and amazement that there were a design house that were absolutely lockstep with, yeah, this has to feel like it is genuinely from all those eras. And one thing you may have noticed, which was an additional challenge, was we all know there was a catastrophic fire at the X-Files offices.
Right.
Yes.
And I knew this going into the pitch, and I thought, if this gets greenlit, I'm going to pay really close attention on the rewatch and figure out what was important to me was multiple explanations as to how some of these files, which were important to cover for a lot of these really classic Monster of the Week cases, how they could exist in an actual official archive, but not be cheesy and not cheat it too much, but actually come up with legitimate reasons, whether the CDC department obviously would have had a copy or whatever it is. I wanted to make sure there was a really vast variety of explanations, which hopefully as fans that you feel like that I landed that concept pretty legitimately too.
Definitely.
Yes. Okay. Where are we?
We wanted to know, well, the hardest part of writing the book.
Yeah. What was the hardest part? I mean, you know, it seems like the whole book to me personally was really hard, you know, but for you, what was the most hardest or the most challenging, you know, of doing this book?
That's a great question. I think it's almost a multiple experience of being really hard, really challenging, but also really fun and gratifying at the same time, almost in parallel, which was writing in their voices, writing in Mulder and Scully's voices, because it had to be a really delicate balance, because of course I'm rewatching the show, making all these notes, and then I'm starting to take really specific character notes about the kind of the rhythm with which they both speak. And you get some nice examples of, especially in the early episodes, of, you know, Scully's doing a draft of her report and there's that voiceover technique that's used a lot. Those were really helpful because you get a sense of the pace and the rhythm with which Agent Scully wrote. And Mulder does that too sometimes. But phrases they say, you know, there's a lot of, you know, Mulder, are you suggesting? There's a lot of, there's a lot of well, not catchphrases, but just vernacular, which they, you know, imbue their dialogue with each other with. So there's a lot of pre-work that happens before you even sit down and start writing in a character's voice. It's really listening to that. And then there's a balance with, these are official government reports. So they can't sound, how can I put it? It can't sound too flamboyant or expressive, because they are actually filing this in an official document style. So it's a really fine balance, but I love the challenge of that. It was a real thrill to feel like, and again, it becomes automatic when you've done all the foundational work and you really study those kind of things. When you start writing, you almost, you know, when you're going wrong. You're writing a sentence or a collection of sentences and you just delete them immediately. You go, no, Mulder wouldn't say that, delete that, Scully wouldn't say that. And then you rephrase it. Because that, to me, that was probably the most important thing of the book, was making sure that there was a sense of Mulder and Scully in the book. And also being really, I wanted to be subtle about this, but it's important too, is that although it is Monster of the Week cases, these episodes and cases come at these characters at points in their life where, you know, crazy things have happened on this show with the mythology, and catastrophic things and devastating things personally and emotionally. So I wanted to make sure there was also little hints and senses of those periods of times for Mulder and Scully, so the fans feel like that they are in the right timeline. They're not just completely randomly case files about crazy monsters, you know.
Right.
Exactly. So how does writing this book compare to all the other books you've written and all your other work?
Goodness. Well, this is an in-world book, and I love doing in-world books because they are, as I've described, a very different experience. I did a couple of other in-world books with Tara Bennett, the Fringe book, Fringe September's Notebook, which was that was the first proper in-world book that I took on with Tara, to create, again, a sense that this is an artifact, exists from the show. And we did a couple of others, but this was by far, I think, the hardest one because of the details that we really wanted to drill into. And even things like making sure that the handwriting that's actually someone's handwriting. There is no font, no typed font that's used. That is an artist. It's the whole like subdivision of the industry where you have these great handwriting artists who do great handwriting for published books, because that's obviously got to look great and look cool and feel like it is Agent Harrison writing the notes and compiling the files. So I'd say this is probably the most intensive world building book that I've worked on, and in that sense, one of the most gratifying. And being a gigantic fan of the show, it's almost a singular experience, you know, getting the green light to do it, and then getting to piece it together with these great designers and just make sure every file is as it should be, and then getting all these great extra Easter eggs thrown in from the producers from the show. I think it's safe to say it's unlike, in that sense, it's unlike any book I've ever done before.
It's interesting, like how detailed you were, and we hear like over and over. It seems like everybody that works on the X-Files is very, very detailed. Like we've heard from Chris Carter about how detailed he was, and the prop people. Like every little nuance has to be just right. It's kind of an interesting thing with the X-Files.
Whoever touches the X-Files or has anything to do with the X-Files, everything has got to be
really detailed.
Perfect detail.
You're 100% right. And as I said at the top of our chat, the show was the inspiration for this book. And so it, it wouldn't be right to shortcut anything.
Right.
And I mean anything. If fans go through and they just look at every square inch of every page, we've made sure that there's no stone left unturned from what we could reveal in terms of little details, or in the right senses, leave things mysterious, leave things that are really grounded in the mythology of, and they're really neat ideas, things like the Tina and Cindy, the twins, the Eve episode. We had this concept of, well, they've got these amazing powers, and so the security camera footage that we wanted to use, and this was a really crucial thing, I was really strict about, okay, when should characters be shown in a case file, as in the photograph of their face or whatever it is. And if you don't see a character's profile of their face or whatever in a file, there's a reason for that, because in the rules of the show and the rules of this book, it wouldn't exist. And so in the Eve episode, we wanted to have a moment where we do see them to really ground the file, but we had it from a security camera that was kind of glitching. We see the static was like fixing across their faces, because that's what they would do. They wouldn't want to be, catalogued, because they're the most rebellious, rebellious characters of the show. They're like, no, I'm not interested in that. And same with DPO, which I know you're a big fan of, because I listened to the X-Files Diaries podcast. No. So you'll notice that that fella is not interested in having his photograph taken at the institution which he is imprisoned at, and he will just electrically burn all the photographs. So that's the only version they have. It's all just melted, because he's got no interest in what they want out of him. And so for me, that was another layer of authenticity for this book, was to make sure that my head was really in every single character, and every single case was bespoke. There was barely any repetition in terms of how you would handle those characters in a book form. And that's also the fun of it, because there's 50 odd case files in this book, so you really could play with that a lot, and as you say, honor the show, honor the detail. And that, for me as a fan, from being a kid, that was my mind was blown by that, the fact that this was an era of, sure, there were visual effects components to the show, but most of it, as your preservation work is capturing, was practical. This was a time of special effects rather than visual effects being the overriding thing. And even to this day, I think fans agree, if you look at the Blu-rays especially, it stands up incredibly. The physical prosthetic work is remarkable.
Yep.
So when when the book was released, time passed a little bit. Were you surprised that it was such a big hit and the fans just ate it up? I mean, how did that feel?
That's another great question. Really emotional, if I'm honest. I'm happy to say that it was. You have something in your head that you want, because again, I did this for fans. I'm a fan, I did it for the fans. Like, this is something the fans should have in their hands if it's possible to achieve it, and to see the responses was remarkable. I always hoped it would connect. I think I wanted to believe, but whenever you do these kind of books that are really passion projects, your passion for it is a big part of it when you're talking to the publishers, talking to the licensor. And I believed from, say, 2015 was when I first pitched the idea, and there was no sort of umming and ahhing. It was an emphatic, the fans need this. The fans should have a book that is the actual X-Files. Who wouldn't want that if you're a fan? So I always believed that with all my heart, but seeing the response was incredible, and remains to be incredible. It's a really great community of fans that, seeing the social media responses, just hearing feedback from fans, seeing reviews and things, or think pieces about it, is overwhelming. And I'm so happy that they're happy, essentially.
Right.
Well, you did, like I said, you did a great job. The fans love it.
Thank you.
And it's always like you were saying about the fans, it's so impressive to me, the fandom, and how it's still growing and so strong, support for you, support for us. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, I think fandoms are really interesting in how different they can be. Some fandoms for other franchises or TV shows or movie series can have, you know, there are very loud supportive shows, but there can be some real aggressive supporters of things as well, as I'm sure you guys know. But I'm so delighted that the X-Files fandom just seems so nice. They just seem just very supportive of a concept and a book like this and what you guys do and the podcasts that happen. And I guess it's the spirit of the show, right? You know, the show has just got this great, massive mythology, massive cast of characters that, you know, there's a lot of scary and sinister things that happen, but there's a great heart to the show. I think, you know, Chris Carter did a great job with all of his team of giving the show that heart, which is, of course, you know, David and Gillian's performance as Mulder and Scully there is no show, is there, without Mulder and Scully? You can't do it.
Right. It just amazes me, you know, with the X-Files itself that, you know, some of the fan base, I'm noticing it's getting younger and younger. That you know, I'm thrilled, you know, because, you know, shows from the past and everything, why, you know, people don't pay attention, they get shelved, you know. It's just, I want to see this show, well, we want to see this show continue, you know, to be talked about, to be watched, you know. And I'm sure your book is going to be, you know, read for years to come.
I hope so. I hope it becomes almost like an additional experience. And some of the loveliest fan feedback was things like that, where people have said, you know, it sits on my coffee table, and whenever I want to watch an episode of the show, which I know is inside the book, I kind of watch the episode, pause it, read a little bit about the case file, go back to it. And you know, you cannot ask for more than that. That's an incredible way of honoring everybody's work that went into this book. And can't say enough about the archivist team, who were amazing. Of course, there are so many artifacts in this book that are, as I say, actually from the show. And the joy and the thrill of spending hours and hours going through these folders that were found, and boxes that were found by the archival team, because I can't emphasize that enough for anyone watching this or listening to this, that the things that are in this book that were beautifully scanned at high resolution hadn't seen the light of day for decades. They were literally just stuck in a box in a corner, because why would they be? Like, what, you guys know this better than me.
Yeah.
Why would anybody be lifting those out and studying folders? And so one of the great joys as a fan, and again, you have to kind of just, you know, focus on the task at hand and not be distracted, is to go through these paper props, as I call them, to try and find the cool things like the dental records from the Shapes episode, or you know, the Stoners witness testimonies they gave in the Weremonster episode. It's finding these things that were often really compressed because there were so many things on top of them. So it's a case of teasing apart paper and acetates really carefully.
Yeah.
And then it's finding gold. And we had that on a regular basis, going, oh my God, I can't believe we actually found this thing, which I know the fans are going to have a hoot reading, because for me, one of the great joys of this book was the things that are never seen on camera or to the side of a shot, or seen for a few seconds, if that, and getting the opportunity to, as a fan, to sit down and actually study the actual document in front of you was a thrill for me to sort of orchestrate and put together, but then to watch it come to life with the great design team and Fox's participation and getting everything all together was just incredible.
Awesome.
That's good stuff. That's great.
Every time you look through the book, you're finding something new.
There's been plenty of times. Of times. I'm old school, you know. I'm DVD, Blu-ray, you know. I'll pop an X-File disc in, and I look through your book as I'm like listening to the show. You know, I'm really looking at your book, but just listening to the show. So, you know, I look at it all the time. It's a great book.
That's a great honor. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Yeah. So we have to ask the standard questions. But are you mythology or monster of the week?
It's such a great question, and I said to the X-Files Diaries podcast team, I think last year, and we had a really great discussion about this. it's going to be Mythology, which might surprise you because I focus on this book being a Monster of the Week book. But for me, when I say Mythology, what I'm really referring to is the overarching storyline of Mulder and Scully. So for me, although the Monster of the Week episodes are fantastic, amazing pieces of work, there's something about that overarching relationship. That's what I always refer to when I say Mythology, that I love how that develops. I love the drama of it. I love the secrets, the double crosses, and just the conflict within them as partners. And it's almost like there's this fantastic, almost like accordion playing of their relationship, where there's moments where they become a lot closer. Yeah. And there are cases or things, especially within the mythology, which can almost tear them apart and then bring them back together again. And I love that. I love the seesawing effect of that, because it's such a dramatic thing to watch. And just their relationship over the course of the whole show I think it remains the crowning glory of TV relationships, right? I mean, I can't think of, there are plenty of incredible TV shows which have investigating partners or a team or whatever it is, but has it been bettered? Have Mulder and Scully and everything they represent for the overarching storyline of the show, has that been topped? I don't think so. And I love a lot of TV, but that's platinum right there.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that.
Well, it does surprise me though, because I really was expecting you to say Monster of the Week.
Well, and again, they're very close. You know, we're not talking about a huge distance between my loves for them, because clearly I'm a big monster guy, and I love the more standalone case files too, because again, not only do we get to explore fantastic other characters and fantastic and strange situations, but again, some of my favorite episodes are the Monster of the Week episodes because of what Mulder and Scully get up to in those cases. So it's not exclusively the mythology.
All right, so since you said, like favorite episodes, we're gonna do it a little different. Favorite Monster of the Week episode.
Okay. Oh, man, of the 200 plus episodes there are of this show, my goodness.
Yeah.
Monster of the Week. I've said this before, and I know that a lot of fans pick this one, but for me, it's not just the critters they encounter. It is the entire episode, front to back, left to right, all departments is bad blood. Everybody was on their A game in that episode. I think it's just an amazing piece of writing. Especially, I always like to say this about Bad Blood. This far into a show, years into a show, seasons into a show, to do an episode where you have the partnership fragmented and we're watching their version of events from both sides is hysterical, because it really gives you an insight in many ways to how Mulder sees, maybe how he sees himself in their relationship when he gets, a bee in his bonnet about a case and that he's right. And also likewise with Scully. Right. Being a scientist and being extremely smart about analyzing all this stuff. So there's just, it's an embarrassment of riches of things to love about Bad Blood. But I do want to shout out from one of the most recent seasons. I really, really love the Were Monster episode with Rhys Darby, because again, I think what I love about that is that again, it's the return season. It's from season 10. To come out the gate with an episode that strong, that funny, with a genius idea. We've all seen, we're all horror fans. We've all seen a kind of monster, werewolf critter situation happen with a horror story, but to completely flip it on its head and to have the creature bitten and then becoming human, it's just, it's one of those ideas, I think, where you just go, it's so obvious, why has no one done it? And so I think that's just a cracking episode. I'm a huge Rhys Darby fan. I think he's incredibly talented. And I just, there's everything about that episode. For me, it felt like in season 10, when you watch that episode, I think if you pull the Were Monster episode out and plopped it in any other season, alongside things like Bad Blood, I think the dynamic of Mulder and Scully, the writing, the way that everyone's dancing through the episode, having so much fun, it stands up against many of the classics. So
I agree.
I want to get some love.
I agree, because in season 11, I feel the same way with like the episode Familiar. I mean,
Oh yeah.
that episode, it felt so old school X-Files. You could take that and put it, in the original run. It just had that feel to it,
Yeah. You say season 11. I'll see you on that, and I'll raise you with the AI cafe episode, the sushi episode. I think that's such an audacious episode to do, where there's barely any talking, any dialogue.
Right.
And so on a technical level and a story level, very impressive to swing for the fences with that and go, we're going to do this in season 11. But I also just love the way it's chillingly a bit too close to home as to what we're all experiencing with AI and technology, but to do it with so much fun as well, to do it with a scary horror component and a tongue-in-cheek component, which I think, again, the X-Files was just the master of that, making you really scared, and then the next second you're laughing and you go, how are you
Exactly.
those two tones.
Right.
Season 11 was a very impressive season in terms of the I think the range of stories that they wanted to tell. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah,
we enjoyed it.
Okay, now Mythology. What's your favorite episode in the Mythology?
Oh man, I think that's harder to answer than the Monster of the Week, just because it's where do you drop the needle in the and I almost don't want to talk about an episode specific to like a title. For me, it's more like the story points, like the beats. I really love all the stuff with the rubbings of the artifacts and the UFO craft. That's the kind of the end beat of in the ocean, because I think that with all the stuff they were doing with the black oil, which is again incredible. I remember we all do, the first time we saw the black oil come into the show, I'd never seen anything like that in a science fiction adventure mystery before, and it blew my mind. Just the visual of it was so gross and so creepy. I love the fact that it is like an intelligent organism as a goo is just fantastic. But at that point in the show where Scully, what I love is Scully in that part of the storyline. Scully is just, relentlessly pursuing the truth in a scientific, but also embracing the religious and the biblical aspects of it to save Mulder. And, I'm a sucker for those things in this show where, especially in the myth arc stuff, where Scully or Mulder in different forms, it is just that their singularity is to save the other. And I just think it's a beautiful thing to watch. And that makes me immediately want to put that to one side and go, what I really love in season 8 is that sense of it. I love the way that the mythology pivots in a huge way with season 8. And I always describe season 8, I think it's a very underrated season, because I feel that season 8 is one big movie. I think that if you binge watch the whole of season 8, although there are standalone-ish cases, what you see Scully going through in desperately trying to find Mulder and how Doggett supports the storyline, I love all those kind of terrifying flashes we get of what Mulder's going through on the craft. It's just really gnarly and really pushing the boundaries of that stuff. But what I really love in the mythology sense is when the way they handle him coming back, the death of Mulder essentially and his resurrection, but the way they handle it with the Billy Myers stuff. Oh man, I mean, could you ever have guessed 8 seasons on?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We'd come back to the start. And so from a mythological sense, I know a lot of people love a lot of the classic Deep Throat stuff and the alien mythologies and the black oil, and obviously CSM. We could talk about CSM for hours, but the later chunks of the mythology where they took really big, daring, swing for the fences story decisions, I dig a lot. I think it's really cool stuff.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yep.
And I'll always be wondering now if we could have more, where was Chris going to take us?
Exactly.
Because look what he did with season 8. He brought us all the way back to the beginning. Where would he bring us if he could keep going?
Absolutely. And that last, the last episode, the My Struggle 4, the last shot of him through the water coming. It's such an image, and there's a lot of there's a lot of love for that stuff.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and then what Chris Carter,
Chris said to us.
what he
That's
said to
how
us,
he ended our interview.
yeah, he said, why
I'll
was
leave you one thing. Why was Jackson smiling?
I was
Is
about to
that
bring that up because I watched your great interview with Chris, and when he said that, I thought,
Why was
wow, okay, you guys got that at the end of that interview. That was pretty classic. Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely makes you think, right?
yeah, it does.
100%. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well,
I think we covered all of our questions we had for you.
Great.
your time.
I
Absolutely.
really appreciate your time. This has been really fun, and can't thank you enough for having me on your show. You know, this
It's
is
our pleasure. Totally our pleasure.
Thank you for the great book.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at it over and over again. So
my absolute pleasure. And as I hinted, definitely, if you can crack the code of what is on the back of the book, there's a series of numbers. If you can figure out what that says, perhaps some of the actual XFiles case numbers, maybe there are more things to be revealed.
interesting.
I'll leave you with that.
There you go. That's very
Thank
Chris
you.
Carter of you.
Thank you. Well, if
so
you
it's a cliffhanger, so we've got to do cliffhangers, right?
Right.
right.
It's very
If
Chris
you
Carter.
haven't purchased his book, purchase it. It's one of the best reads. You know,
Thank you, sir.
Get this
I really
great book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Have
you.
a great rest of the day, and great work with the preservation. Just keep it rolling. I'm really excited for when you guys are ready with your space to open. I need to figure out a trip. Now the world is starting to come back to normal. I need to figure out when you are ready to come and take in all that amazing X-Files props and costumes and all that goodness.
Yeah, the ball's rolling. You know, the ball's it's starting to pick up a little bit more steam. You know,
It's exciting.
It's a lot involved.
Just
We can't wait though. We can't wait to see everybody.
Right.
I salute you with all the other X-Files fans for your work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.